From the glory days of the Mustang to the fire-breathing Torino and Mercury Cougar, Ford delivered some of the fastest, fiercest machines on American roads. But what many people don't realize is that Ford also made some of its greatest muscle cars vanish, abruptly, quietly, and in some cases, mysteriously. Whether it was due to tightening emissions laws, oil crises, insurance pressures, or corporate repositioning, Ford built and then buried some of its most impressive muscle machines. Here are 10 epic Ford-built muscle cars that once roared and then disappeared.
Dear viewer, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Thanks for your support.
Number 10, the 1971 Ford Torino Cobra 429, a short-lived powerhouse that delivered serious muscle but got lost in the long shadow of the Mustang. The muscle car era reached its peak in the late 1960s and early 1970s, and by 1971, Detroit was still pumping out big horsepower and even bigger bodies. But while the Mustang hogged the spotlight, Ford's Torino Cobra quietly carried the muscle car torch into the new decade. At the heart of the 1971 Ford Torino, Cobra was the massive 429 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8, an engine designed to devour quarter miles and leave rubber behind. Yet despite its power and potential, the Cobra would disappear after just one more model year. The Ford Torino was introduced in 1968 as an upscale version of the Fairlane. By 1970, it had taken over as Ford's main midsize offering. Available in a wide range of trims, from plain Jane sedans to fire-breathing muscle coupes, the Torino was both practical and performance-capable, but it never had a clear identity. Unlike the Mustang, a youth market sports coupe, or the GTO, a muscle car with street cred, the Torino was caught in between. It was bigger, heavier, less iconic. Still, Ford kept swinging for the fences. For 1970 to 71, the Torino Cobra became the muscle-focused model, lean on frills, big on horsepower. In 1971, the Torino received only minor visual changes from the sleek 1970 redesign. Its Coke bottle silhouette remained, with bulging fenders, a fastback roofline, and a long hood that screamed American muscle. The Cobra model was a no-nonsense street brawler. It came standard with bench seats, Cobra badging, flat black hood treatment, optional Ram air induction, a performance-tuned suspension with heavy-duty springs and shocks. It wasn't plush and it wasn't fancy. This was Ford's answer to the Plymouth Roadrunner. Pure, affordable muscle without the fluff. The main event was what lived under the hood, the 429 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8, with options that escalated from potent to ferocious. Engine options for the 1971 Torino Cobra: 429 Cobra Jet, CJ 370 horsepower at 5,400 RPM, 450 pound-feet of torque at 3,400 RPM 4-barrel carburetor, 10.6 to 1 compression optional Ram, Air 429 Super Cobra Jet, SCJ, drag pack, still rated at 375 horsepower, but with significant internal upgrades, solid lifters, forged pistons, external oil cooler, designed for sustained high RPM abuse, required 4.11 or 3.91 rear axle ratio. More honest output was closer to 425 plus horsepower. The 429S CJ, especially with Ram Air, was a quarter-mile monster. Despite the factory underrating, real-world tests put 0 to 60 mile-per-hour times in the low 6-second range and quarter-mile passes in the 13s, depending on gearing. While the Torino Cobra had the power, it had issues that held it back. It was heavy, often tipping the scales at over 3,900 pounds. The 429 was thirsty, especially with 4.11 gears and no overdrive. It lacked the brand glamour of the Mustang or the cool factor of a Chevelle SS. Worse, the insurance companies were cracking down on high-horsepower cars. Young buyers, the prime muscle car market, were suddenly being priced out by sky-high premiums. Then came the emissions mandates. For 1971, compression ratios began dropping, and unleaded fuel was around the corner. The writing was on the wall for big blocks. Ford had a marketing problem in 1971. On one side, it had the Torino Cobra, a brutal, fast muscle car that could outperform many of its rivals. On the other, it had the Mustang Mach 1, which had better name recognition, more compact dimensions, and massive public interest. The Torino Cobra was never going to win that fight. Fewer than 3,000 Cobra models were produced in 1971. Most buyers opted for the more comfortable and better-known GT or Mach 1 Mustang. By 1972, the Cobra name was gone. The muscle era was over. The Torino platform lived on, including in NASCAR where it remained competitive. But the Cobra 429 was a one-year phenomenon, extinguished before it could gain legendary status. Today, the 1971 Torino Cobra 429 is a rare and underappreciated gem of the muscle car era. Reasons it's worth remembering. It featured one of the most powerful factory big block V8s ever put in a Ford. It was faster than a 429 Mustang Mach 1 in some configurations. It represented the final stand of pure, unfiltered Detroit muscle. Collectors now value these cars, especially Ram Air, SCJ, or drag pack models. But they still don't command the prices of Mustangs or Hemi Mopars. That makes them one of the best-kept secrets in muscle car history. Number 9, the 1972 Ford Gran Torino Sport 351 Cobra Jet. A mid-size muscle car struggling to hold the line as the golden age of American performance faded into the smog. By 1972, the American muscle car era was unraveling. New emission standards, rising insurance costs, and the looming energy crisis were choking off the high-octane power fantasies of the late 1960s. Automakers scrambled to adapt with varying success. In the midst of this transition, Ford launched the redesigned 1972 Gran Torino, a sleek, larger-than-life coupe that looked the part of a muscle machine, especially in its sport trim with the 351 Cobra Jet V8. It had presence, it had pedigree, and yet it was already outdated the moment it arrived. The 1972 Gran Torino marked a complete restyling of Ford's midsize lineup. Gone was the clean, aggressive Coke bottle shape of the 1970-71 Torino. In its place came a bulkier, swoopier fastback design, a prominent egg crate grille with a center beak, Ford's new corporate look, sculpted body sides and flared wheel arches, an increase in curb weight and in size across the board. The Gran Torino Sport was the performance-oriented trim level, replacing the outgoing Torino Cobra. But unlike the raw, no-frills muscle machines of the previous decade, the Gran Torino Sport was now a mix of style and softened performance, more of a GT cruiser than a track terror. The big change for 1972 was the switch to net horsepower ratings, which instantly made every muscle car seem weaker on paper. Engines that had once boasted 375 horsepower were now rated at 266 horsepower or less, not because they lost power, but because the rating system finally reflected real-world output with accessories and emissions equipment attached. The Gran Torino Sport could be had with a range of V8s, but the top street performance option was the 351 Cobra Jet. 351 Cobra Jet specs, 1972, 351 cubic inches, 5.8 liters, Cleveland Frontier 8, rated at 266 horsepower, net at 5,400 RPM. Torque, 301 pound-feet at 580 RPM, 3,400 RPM, 4-barrel carburetor, 9.2-to-1 compression ratio, optional dual exhausts and Ram Air. While not a true successor to the brutal 429 Super Cobra Jet, the 351 CJ was still a capable engine, especially when paired with the optional 4-speed manual or C6 automatic and a limited slip rear end. But it was no longer about blistering quarter-mile times. The 351 CJ was now a blend of respectable acceleration and road-going comfort, a reflection of the new muscle market realities. In real-world performance, the 1972 Gran Torino Sport 351 Cobra Jet was quick but no longer ferocious. 0 to 60 miles per hour, approximately 7.7 seconds, when properly equipped mile, approximately 15.5 seconds. Top speed, around 120 miles per hour. This was a step back from earlier muscle monsters, but still respectable, especially given the car's hefty 4,000-plus pound curb weight and increasingly restrictive emissions hardware. Unfortunately, buyers noticed. They remembered when Cobra jets had fire and fury. This new version felt muted, as if the body had outgrown the engine. The Gran Torino Sport was aimed at the adult performance buyer, someone who wanted the look of a muscle car with a smoother ride and more room than a Mustang. However, it fell into a marketing no man's land. Too big to be nimble like the Mustang. Too slow to compete with past Torinos or Mopar Brutes. Too subtle to catch the eye of the next generation of performance fans. Sales were respectable. Ford moved over 496,000 Gran Torinos in 1972. But the sport models with the 351 Cobra jet made up only a small fraction of those. Most buyers chose base V8s and automatic transmissions. True performance seekers were looking elsewhere, or giving up entirely. The 1972 Gran Torino Sport 351 CJ represents a transitional phase in American performance. Not the peak, but the pivot point. It was one of the last Ford cars to wear the Cobra jet name, a symbol of performance diluted by regulation. A muscle car in a luxury coupe's body, a prelude to the personal luxury era that would soon dominate, e.g. Ford Elite, Thunderbird, Monte Carlo. Its greatest claim to fame today? Perhaps its use in the 2008 film Gran Torino, where Clint Eastwood's character owns a pristine example. That exposure has rekindled interest in these long-overlooked muscle cars, even if they were already past their prime when new. Number 8, the 1968 Ford Fairlane 500R Code, one of the most brutal and underappreciated factory drag machines of the late 1960s. In the high-stakes horsepower wars of the 1960s, Ford wasn't about to let Chevrolet or Mopar have all the fun. With NHRA dominance on the line and street cred fueling sales, Ford created something truly wild in 1968, the Fairlane 500R Code, a factory-built sleeper with one purpose in mind: drag strip domination. It was raw, loud, rare, and brutally fast. But it wasn't long for this world. Crushed by emissions regulations, insurance penalties, and a changing automotive landscape, the R Code faded into obscurity, known only to hardcore Ford fanatics and vintage drag racers. Let's dig into the story of this mechanical beast, what made it special, why it was built, and why it disappeared so quickly. The Ford Fairlane had long served as a practical, mid-size family car, but by 1966 to 1967, Ford realized this platform could be turned into a lightweight performance weapon. In 1968, Ford redesigned the Fairlane and its close sibling, the Torino. The Fairlane 500 was the middle trim level. Nothing fancy, but that's what made it perfect for a drag-focused build. Keep it light, skip the frills, and drop in as much engine as you could. The 1968 R Code Fairlane wasn't just a hot rod, it was a race car with a license plate. At the heart of the Fairlane R Code was Ford's fearsome 427 cubic inch, 7.0-liter V8 known internally as the side oiler. 427 R Code specs horsepower, 390 horsepower at 5,600 RPM gross. Torque 460 pound-feet at 3,200 RPM. Carburation, dual Holley 4-barrel carbs, dual quad. Compression ratio, 11.6 to 1. Solid lifter camshaft. Cast iron headers and aluminum intake manifold. Despite the factory rating of 390 horsepower, most enthusiasts agree that the real output was likely well over 300 horsepower, over 425 horsepower. Ford had a habit of understating power for insurance and NHRA classing purposes. Originally designed for NASCAR and endurance racing, the 427 was proven on tracks from Le Mans to Daytona. In a Fairlane body, it made for a street-legal thunderbolt. The R Code package wasn't about comfort, it was about shaving weight and maximizing performance. Typical features included no air conditioning, no power steering, bench seat interior, heavy-duty suspension and rear axle, close ratio top-loader 4-speed manual, 9-inch rear with 4.11 or 4.30 gears, optional Ram air shaker hood scoop. It was the kind of car you bought if you planned to go straight from the dealership to the drag strip. Ford didn't advertise the R Code Fairlane. You had to know what to ask for. It was built for a niche crowd: street racers, bracket racers, and those in the know. In testing, the R-Code Fairlane 500 could rocket down the quarter mile in the low 13-second range, on street tires and with a skilled driver. With slicks and tuning, 12-second runs were possible, making it one of the fastest American cars of its time. Contemporary muscle cars like the 426 Hemi Roadrunner or L88 Corvette were competitive, but the Fairlane R-Code was more underground, more serious. It wasn't about comfort, it was about straight-line brutality. Ford only built around 600 R-Code Fairlanes and Torinos combined in 1968, and fewer than 300 of those were Fairlanes. The low production numbers came down to high cost, limited availability, extreme insurance surcharges, no promotion or marketing push. The 427 engine was also on its way out, replaced by the newer 428 Cobra jet in 1969, which was cheaper to build and more street-friendly. After 1968, the 427 was dead in street cars, and so was the R-Code Fairlane. No second act, no wide release. It went out the way it came in, quietly, quickly, and with fury. The 1968 Fairlane 500 R-Code has become a legend among Ford drag racing enthusiasts, but it never achieved the mainstream recognition of Mustangs, Cobras, or even Torino GTs. It remains one of the last factory cars to feature the 427 side oiler, a blue-collar muscle car assassin, a factory drag strip ghost with understated looks and overwhelming performance. Today, surviving examples are extremely rare and highly collectible, often hidden away in private collections or restored for nostalgia drag events. Number 7, the 1971 Ford Mustang Boss 351, one of the last true high-performance Mustangs before the muscle car era began to fade. In 1971, the muscle car era was on borrowed time. Insurance rates were skyrocketing, emissions regulations were tightening, gas prices were creeping up. Yet in the midst of this looming crackdown, Ford delivered one last fire-breathing Mustang for the true enthusiasts, the Boss 351. Overshadowed by its legendary predecessors, the Boss 302 and the Boss 429, the Boss 351 has often been forgotten, but in many ways it was the most balanced, most complete, and most underrated Boss of them all. Today we're going to take a deep dive into this one-year-only beast, what it was, why it mattered, and how it slipped through the cracks of muscle car history. Ford's Boss program started with a purpose: to dominate in Trans Am, Boss 302, and NASCAR, Boss 429. Racing. These homologation specials were built for serious motorsports credentials, and they earned a cult following almost immediately. By 1971, both the 302 and the 429 had run their course. The Boss 302 was discontinued after 1970 due to changing Trans Am rules. The Boss 429 was too expensive and complex for mainstream appeal. Ford still wanted a high-performance Halo Mustang, something fast, streetable, and capable of competing with Mopar and GM. Enter the Boss 351. The 1971 Mustang was redesigned, and it was bigger in every direction. Nearly 3 inches wider and 2.1 inches longer than the 1969-1970 model, 600 pounds heavier than the original 65 Mustang. This bulk hurt agility, but gave the car a more aggressive, intimidating profile. The Boss 351 looked the part with flat black hood with functional NACA duct ram air scoops. Boss 351 decals on the front fenders, optional rear spoiler and front chin spoiler. Magnum 500 wheels, it was subtle but muscular, a visual nod to its mechanical seriousness. At the heart of the Boss 351 was the 351 cubic inch Cleveland Vibe 8, heavily modified for high-performance use. Boss 351, engine specs, horsepower, 330 horsepower at 5,400 RPM. Torque, 370 pound-feet at 4,000 RPM. Compression ratio, 11.7 to 1, solid lifter camshaft. High flow heads with big valves, ported like racing heads. Aluminum intake manifold with a 750 CFM Holley 4-barrel carb. This engine loved to rev, unlike most big blocks of the time, and made the Boss 351 feel alive above 575, 3,500 RPM. In the real world, it could run the quarter mile in the mid to high 13s, making it faster than the Boss 302, and about equal in straight-line performance to the Boss 429, which was heavier and more temperamental. Ford didn't just stuff a hot engine into the Boss 351. They gave it a full suite of performance upgrades: top-loader close-ratio 4-speed manual transmission, 9-inch rear axle with 3.91 traction lock gears, competition suspension with heavy-duty springs and shocks, front and rear anti-roll bars, power front disc brakes. As a result, the Boss 351 handled better than any big block Mustang ever made, and was arguably one of the most well-rounded muscle cars of the early 70s. Despite all of this performance, the Boss 351 was a sales flop. Only 1,806 units were built. Why? The insurance companies penalized high-performance cars like never before. The looming 1972 model year would bring lower compression and net horsepower ratings, cutting into performance. Ford was pivoting away from specialty muscle toward volume sales and emissions compliance. By 1972, the Boss name was gone, and the Mustang was already softening into a luxury coupe. The Boss 351 became a one-hit wonder. The Boss 351 often gets overshadowed. The Boss 302 has a Trans Am championship and racing legacy. The Boss 429 is a collector's dream, thanks to its NASCAR-tuned Hemi-headed engine and extreme rarity. But the Boss 351 may have been the most usable, best handling, and best rounded of the three. It offered real-world drivability, track-worthy suspension, respectable straight-line speed, better balance and lower cost than the 429. Collectors have begun to recognize this in recent years, but in its own time, the Boss 351 was largely ignored, its thunder drowned out by rising gas prices, regulatory strangulation, and the death of the muscle car market. Number 6, the 1966 Ford Galaxie 7-liter. A fascinating and often forgotten blend of full-size luxury and brute force performance from the muscle car era's dawn. In the mid-1960s, the muscle car war was just beginning to heat up. Pontiac's GTO had shocked the industry, and Chevrolet was arming the Chevelle with big block power. But Ford had something different in mind. Enter the 1966 Ford Galaxie 7-liter, a one-year-only full-sized muscle luxury hybrid that didn't quite fit the mold of the muscle car movement. It was too big for the track, too plush for the strip, and too powerful to ignore. It existed in a category all its own, a brief and bold experiment in brute performance cloaked in a gentleman's suit. Let's explore how this 7-liter wonder tried and failed to carve out a niche in American performance history. By the mid-1960s, the Ford Galaxie was Ford's go-to full-size car, a comfortable cruiser that often doubled as a NASCAR warrior in its lighter 427-equipped forms. But in 1966, Ford decided to create a new top-tier trim level for the Galaxie 500 line, the 7-liter. This wasn't just a luxury cruiser. It was Ford's answer to cars like the Pontiac Grand Prix, the Oldsmobile Starfire, the Chevrolet Impala SS 427. These were personal luxury muscle cars, powerful, stylish, and a little less youthful than your average GTO or Fairlane GT. Visually, the 7-liter Galaxie was elegant but menacing if you knew what to look for. Ford gave it 7-liter emblems on the front fenders and rear, a unique grille and taillight design, chrome trim, and a power bulge hood. Standard bucket seats with a center console, uncommon for a full-size Ford, optional convertible, or hardtop body styles. It didn't scream muscle, it whispered it. This was the kind of car that a banker could drive to work and then drag race on the weekends. The 7-liter came standard with the 428 cubic inch V8, Ford's newest big block at the time, replacing the 406 and sitting just under the race-bred 427 engine specs. Horsepower, 345 horsepower. Torque, over 460 pound-feet. Carburation, 4-barrel Holley carb, compression, 10.5 to 1. The 428 was a torque monster, delivering low-end grunt ideal for street performance and highway cruising. It wasn't as wild as the 427, but it didn't need to be. The 428 was smoother, more civilized, and easier to live with, perfect for the Galaxie's dual personality. It could do 0 to 60 miles per hour in about 7 seconds. Quick for a car that weighed nearly 2 tons. Ford didn't just slap in a big engine. The 7-liter came with real performance options, heavy-duty suspension and springs, dual exhaust, optional cruise, O-matic 3-speed automatic or a top-loader 4-speed manual, power front disc brakes, rare at the time, wide track stance and 15-inch wheels. It was a driver's car, not just a Luxo barge. The 4-speed manual and console setup gave the 7-liter a genuine muscle car feel, despite its full-size dimensions. Here's the problem. The 7-liter didn't really fit anywhere. It was too refined and expensive for muscle car buyers. It was too loud and thirsty for luxury car drivers. It didn't have the racing pedigree of the 427 Galaxies, and it didn't have the aggressive youth appeal of the Mustang or Fairlane GT. As a result, sales were modest. Just over 11,000 hardtops and 2,368 convertibles were built. After 1966, the 7-liter name vanished as a standalone model and became an option package in 1967, then disappeared entirely. Today, the 1966 Galaxie 7-liter is a collector's curiosity. It's rare, especially in 4-speed convertible form. While it never gained the notoriety of its smaller Mustang siblings, it represents something Ford rarely did well: a full-size muscle luxury hybrid. It's a car that hints at the future of personal luxury. Coupes like the Thunderbird and Lincoln Mark series offers classic muscle car performance in a formal suit. Showcases Ford's 428 engine before it became more widely used in Mustangs and Torinos. It's a glimpse into a moment when automakers experimented with performance across the size spectrum, before emissions, insurance, and oil embargoes shut it all down. Number 5. The 1970 Ford Ranchero GT 429, a unique hybrid of muscle car power and pickup truck practicality that stood out during the muscle car era's twilight years. The 1970 Ford Ranchero GT 429 was one of the boldest automotive contradictions of its era, a vehicle that combined workhorse utility with muscle car fury. In an age when horsepower was king and performance sold cars, Ford decided to take its mid-sized Torino chassis, bolt on a cargo bed, and then shove a 429 cubic inch V8 under the hood. The result? A truck that could tow, haul, and smoke its rear tires through the quarter mile. An early blueprint for the concept of a muscle truck before anyone even used the term. Let's take a closer look at the short-lived powerhouse known as the 1970 Ford Ranchero GT 429 and why it deserves a place in muscle car history, even if it never fit the mold. The Ford Ranchero first appeared in 1957, and it was unlike anything on American roads. Unlike traditional pickups, the Ranchero was based on a passenger car platform, not a truck chassis. Its design said, "Looks like a car, works like a truck." By the time the muscle car era reached its peak in 1970, the Ranchero had evolved along with Ford's midsize lineup. That year, the Torino got a complete redesign. Longer, lower, and wider. And with that redesign came a more aggressive Ranchero GT, now available with the full array of muscle car V8s, including the monstrous 429 Cobra jet. This was no ordinary utility vehicle. The 1970 Ranchero was styled directly from the Torino, which meant it shared a new Coke bottle shape with curvy fenders and a sculpted profile, an aggressive front fascia with quad headlights and an optional shaker hood, GT-specific trim, including rally wheels, dual racing mirrors, and striping-optional hidden headlamps and body-colored bumpers. The GT variant looked like a sport coupe with a bed, and in the 429 Cobra jet configuration, it carried the visual menace to match its mechanical muscle. Now for the heart of the beast, the 429 cubic inch V8, Available in different forms depending on the buyer's appetite and budget for speed. Available 429 options in 1970. 429 Thunderjet, 360 horsepower. 429 Cobra Jet, CJ, 370 horsepower. High lift camshaft, large valves. 429 Super Cobra Jet, SCJ, 375 horsepower with drag pack option, solid lifters, oil cooler, 3.91 or 4.30 rear. These engines were borrowed directly from Ford's full-blown muscle offerings, like the Torino Cobra and Mustang Mach 1, and dropped into the Ranchero GT with no detuning. That meant you could haul lumber by day and run low 14S at the drag strip by night. The CJ and SCJ engines featured massive torque, with ratings exceeding 450 pound-feet, making the Ranchero not only brutally fast in a straight line, but also capable of towing and payload with ease. Buyers could choose from a heavy-duty C6 automatic transmission, a 4-speed top-loader manual, Ford's 9-inch rear axle, one of the toughest in the business. With optional suspension upgrades and front disc brakes, the Ranchero GT was surprisingly composed for a vehicle that blurred the line between sport and utility. What made the 1970 Ranchero GT 429 so strange and so compelling was its dual nature. Most muscle cars had back seats and big trunks. The Ranchero said, "Forget passengers. Let's haul plywood and lay rubber." It was truly a muscle car with a pickup bed. Payload capacity, over 1,200 pounds. Towing ability, comparable to light-duty trucks. Street presence, intimidating, especially with the Cobra Jet hood scoop. And while it may have been an oddball, the Ranchero GT was surprisingly practical for performance buyers who wanted some utility without giving up V8 thrills. Despite its cool factor and muscle credentials, the Ranchero GT 429 was never a major seller. Buyers looking for muscle cars tended to lean toward Mustangs, Torinos, Fairlanes, and those needing a work truck went with a more traditional F-Series pickup. As a result, very few Ranchero GT 429s were built, especially with the Cobra Jet and Super Cobra Jet engines. Today, they are highly sought after by collectors who understand just how rare and absurdly cool these hybrids really were. Number 4, the 1965 Ford Custom 500R Code, one of the most formidable factory sleepers ever built, and a car whose story has nearly faded from muscle car history. In the world of 1960s muscle cars, names like Mustang, GTO, and Chevelle SS grabbed the headlines. But beneath the radar, a quieter breed of performance machines existed, built not for style or status, but for sheer speed. The 1965 Ford Custom 500R Code was one of the most fearsome of these machines. This car looked like your average police cruiser or fleet sedan. No scoops, no stripes, no badging. But under its unassuming sheet metal lurked one of the most legendary engines of the muscle era, the 427 cubic inch R-Code V8 with dual 4-barrel carburetors producing 425 horsepower. The custom 500R Code wasn't built for the showroom or suburban streets. It was built for drag strips, moonshiners, and high-speed pursuit, and in that role, it excelled. To understand the significance of the R-Code variant, we first need to look at the base model. The Custom 500 was Ford's lowest trim full-size car, sitting below the Galaxie 500 and LTD in luxury and flash. It was available as a 2-door or 4-door sedan with minimal chrome, rubber floor mats, plain bench seats, no-nonsense dashboard. It was meant for government fleets, municipal use, taxi service, and budget-conscious buyers. In short, it was not supposed to be fast, which makes what Ford did next so much more surprising. The term R-Code refers to a specific engine code used by Ford for its most powerful performance engine of the time, the 427 cubic inch big block V8, fitted with dual Holley 4-barrel carburetors, solid lifters, and high-flow cylinder heads. Specs of the R-Code 427 V8, displacement, 427 cubic inches, 7.0 liters. Carburation, dual Holley 4 barrels, dual quads. Compression, 11.5 to 1. Horsepower, 425 horsepower at 6,000 revolutions per minute. Torque, 480 pound-feet at 3,700 RPM. Redline, approximately 6,500 RPM. Forged internals, high nickel block. This engine was built not for daily comfort, but for racing, primarily in NASCAR and NHRA superstock drag racing. It had razor-sharp throttle response and could propel a full-size car into the 12-second quarter-mile range with proper gearing. Why would Ford stuff this monster engine into a base model sedan? Because there was a small but real demand for stealth performance. The R-Code Custom 500 appealed to law enforcement in the South and West, who needed pursuit-capable vehicles that didn't scream race car, drag racers who wanted a lightweight, bare-bones shell to build on for superstock or street racing. Moonshiners and others seeking plain-looking, high-speed transport that could outrun anything on the road. Ford didn't advertise this combo. Buyers had to know what to ask for through special order forms, and only a tiny handful of these R-Code Customs were ever built. The R-Code Custom 500 came with serious supporting hardware. Top-loader 4-speed manual transmission, no automatic available, 9-inch rear end with heavy-duty axle shafts, optional Detroit locker differential, stiffer police spec suspension, manual steering and brakes. This was a driver's machine, not a cruiser. With the dual quads breathing through a deep breathing intake and dump-style exhaust manifolds, it sounded like a race car. But the body still said, "Grandpa's Ford." Straight-line performance was astonishing for the time. 0 to 60 miles per hour, approximately 5.5 seconds. 1/4 mile, 13.0 to 13.5 seconds at approximately 110 miles per hour, with tuning. That made it faster than nearly anything else on the street, including Corvettes, Hemis, and other mid-sized muscle cars just arriving on the scene. The best part? Nobody expected it. You could roll up next to a GTO at a light, look like you were just out getting groceries, and blow it into the weeds. Because it was so specialized, the Custom 500 R-Code is extremely rare today. Ford never kept precise production figures broken down by drivetrain, but only a few dozen are believed to exist, especially with documentation. The muscle car era moved quickly, and by 1966, emissions rules and insurance costs were rising. The 427 was phased out of full-size sedans. Muscle moved toward mid-size platforms like the Fairlane and Mustang. The R-Code Custom 500 was a one-year-only anomaly, lost to time and overshadowed by flashier models. Number 3, the 1969 Ford Cobra, Fairlane Cobra, a muscle car that often gets overshadowed by its Mustang sibling, but deserves a spotlight of its own. When people think of Ford Cobra in the muscle car world, the first image that comes to mind is usually the Shelby Mustang Cobra, a legendary pony car icon. However, in 1969, Ford also offered a different beast called the Ford Cobra, based on the Fairlane Torino platform, not the Mustang. This lesser-known Fairlane Cobra, often called the 1969 Ford Cobra, was Ford's attempt to infuse serious muscle into its mid-size lineup beyond the pony car segment. It packed the firepower to compete with muscle cars like the Chevelle SS and Dodge Charger, but it never got the same recognition, and its production life was brief. Today we'll explore the story of this hidden muscle car, its features, performance, and why it faded away so quickly. By 1969, Ford had muscle cars covering various segments: Mustang, the iconic pony car, Fairlane Torino, the mid-size muscle and family car platform, Galaxie, full-size muscle and cruiser. While the Mustang got all the marketing attention as Ford's performance halo, the mid-size Fairlane and Torino platforms were powerful and versatile. Ford wanted to showcase that muscle wasn't just pony cars, hence the Fairlane Cobra. The 1969 Ford Cobra was essentially a Fairlane Torino-based muscle car equipped with high-performance components, including a 428 cubic inch Cobra Jet V8 under the hood, Ford's top big block engine at the time, delivering around 335 to 360 horsepower, depending on configuration. Heavy-duty suspension upgrades from the Cobra Jet option package. Bold but restrained styling compared to the flashier Mustang Cobra. Unique Cobra badging to set it apart from regular Fairlanes and Torinos. Unlike the Mustang Cobra, which was a smaller pony car, the Fairlane Cobra was a larger, heavier, mid-sized muscle car aimed at customers wanting brute power with more interior space. At the core of the Fairlane Cobra's performance was the legendary 428 Cobra Jet V8 engine. Displacement: 428 cubic inches, 7.0 liters. Horsepower: officially rated around 335 horsepower, though many argue it was underrated, with some claiming actual output closer to 360 horsepower or more. Torque: 440 pound-feet, providing massive low-end grunt. Features: large 4-barrel carburetor, solid lifters, heavy-duty camshaft, and forged internals designed for durability and power. This engine was developed to compete head-on with Chrysler's HEMI and Chevy's big blocks, and was a serious player in the muscle wars. Though powerful, the Fairlane Cobra's heavier mid-size body meant it wasn't as nimble as the Mustang Cobra, but had plenty of straight-line muscle, 0 to 60 miles per hour, around 6.0 seconds, quick for its size and weight. Quarter-mile times, mid to high 13-second range, competitive with other big block muscle cars. Top speed, around 130 miles per hour, depending on gearing. Suspension upgrades and optional heavy-duty brakes made it more manageable than standard Fairlanes, but it still wasn't a precision corner car. It was muscle, raw, and loud. The 1969 Ford Cobra retained much of the Fairlane's clean design, but included subtle yet aggressive touches. Distinctive Cobra badges on the fenders and grille. Optional rally stripes and hockey stick side decals for a sportier look. Blacked-out grille and trim packages available for a more menacing appearance. Minimalist interior with performance gauges in some versions. Unlike the wild Shelby Mustangs, the Fairlane Cobra looked like a serious, no-nonsense muscle car rather than a show pony. The Fairlane Cobra was a bit of an oddball in the muscle car market. It was more expensive and larger than the Mustang Cobra, limiting its appeal to pony car enthusiasts. Buyers seeking performance often gravitated toward the Mustang for its style and brand prestige. Compared to the full-size muscle cars, it was a good middle ground, but it struggled to carve a clear niche. The 1969 model year was its peak, but the muscle car market was starting to shift, and competition intensified. Number 2, the 1973 Ford Mustang Mach 1351 Cobra Jet, a muscle car caught in the twilight of the golden muscle era. By 1973, the muscle car era was gasping its final breaths. Increasing emissions regulations, skyrocketing insurance premiums, and the 1973 oil crisis were reshaping the American automotive landscape. Against this backdrop, the Ford Mustang Mach 1, a flagship muscle pony car, soldiered on. But it was a very different beast from the fire-breathing machines of just a few years earlier. The 1973 Mach 1, with the 351 Cobra Jet CJ, was a symbol of resilience. The last hurrah of classic muscle performance, wrapped in a body burdened by growing regulations and market pressures. Introduced in 1969, the Mustang Mach 1 was Ford's premium muscle pony car, built to compete with Chevy's Camaro SS and Dodge's Challenger. Known for its aggressive styling, performance options, and race-bred credentials, the Mach 1 quickly became an icon of muscle car culture. Early Mach 1s boasted big block 428 Cobra Jet engines and aggressive suspension packages. It combined style and speed to capture the imagination of muscle car fans nationwide. By 1973, however, the Mustang Mach 1 was a shadow of its former self, but it still retained key elements of its performance heritage. The 1973 Mach 1 was the last of the first-generation Mustang Mach 1 models before the major redesign in 1974. It retained much of the body style introduced in 1971, but faced new challenges. Increased weight. Due to added safety equipment and emissions gear, the car became heavier and less agile. Styling changes. The grille lost its aggressive quad headlights, and the front end was somewhat softened. Reduced performance options. Big block engines were gone, leaving the 351 cubic inch V8 as the top option. Despite these compromises, the 1973 Mach 1 remained a serious performer in a shrinking muscle market. The 351 Cobra Jet CJ-V8 was the final performance flagship engine available on the Mach 1. Displacement, 351 cubic inches, 5.8 liters. Horsepower, officially rated at 275 horsepower, though many enthusiasts suspect the real output was higher. Torque, approximately 355 pound-feet. Performance features: high-flow cylinder heads, solid lifters, large camshaft, and a 4-barrel carburetor. The 351 CJ balanced power with the need to meet stricter emissions rules and fuel economy standards. Though the 351 CJ was less potent than earlier big block options, the Mach 1 still offered respectable performance for 1973, 0 to 60 miles per hour. Around 7 seconds, slower than earlier muscle car glory days, but quick for the era. Quarter mile, mid-15-second range, limited by added weight and detuned power. Handling, heavier body and softer suspension. Reduced cornering sharpness compared to earlier Mach 1s. It was still a car that delivered excitement, but its glory days were clearly behind it. The 1973 Mach 1's compromises were driven by external pressures. Emissions regulations, catalytic converters were mandatory by 1975, but by 1973, engines were already detuned to meet new standards. Insurance premiums. Muscle cars became expensive to insure, pricing many enthusiasts out of the market. Fuel crisis. The 1973 oil embargo sparked soaring gas prices and long lines at pumps, dampening muscle car demand. Safety requirements. Added equipment like side marker lights, energy-absorbing bumpers, and seat belts added weight and complexity. All these factors contributed to muscle cars becoming bloated, less powerful, and less affordable. Despite the challenges, the 1973 Mach 1 retained some styling cues that set it apart. Shaker hood scoop. Functional and aggressive, it was a Mach 1 hallmark, allowing fresh air to the carburetor. Racing stripes and Mach 1 badging, bold graphics emphasized its muscle heritage. Sporty interior options, sports seats, wood grain accents, and gauges catered to performance enthusiasts. Dual exhaust system added to the aggressive sound and performance image. Yet it was clear this Mustang was less about pure muscle and more about complying with the new automotive reality. Number 1, the 1970 Ford XL Sports Roof 429, a bold, muscle-infused personal luxury car that's largely forgotten today. The 1970 Ford XL Sports Roof 429 stands at an interesting crossroads in American car history. It's a car that blends two very different automotive trends of the late 1960s and early 1970s, personal luxury and raw muscle performance. Often overlooked and overshadowed by flashier muscle cars and pure luxury coupes, the Ford XL Sports Roof 429 was a big, bold, and powerful machine. Part street brawler, part refined cruiser. By 1970, American car buyers were starting to demand cars that offered both performance and comfort. Pure muscle cars were becoming heavier and more complex due to regulations, while personal luxury cars were booming in popularity. Personal luxury cars, large, stylish, comfortable vehicles emphasizing upscale appointments and smooth rides. Muscle cars, performance-focused with big engines and aggressive styling. Ford sought to merge these worlds with the XL Sports Roof, a variant of the Torino platform, providing muscle under the hood with a plush, luxury-like experience inside. The Ford XL was a top-tier trim of the Torino line, designed to compete with cars like the Chevrolet Monte Carlo and Buick Riviera. The sports roof designation indicated a two-door hardtop with a sleek roofline aimed at a sporty image. Key features: longer, wider body than the Mustang, but sportier than a traditional full-size car. Upscale interior with plush seats, wood grain accents, and convenience features. Distinctive exterior styling with bold grille, chrome trim, and optional racing stripes. Under the hood, the XL Sports Roof could be equipped with a massive 429 cubic inch V8, part of Ford's famous 385 series big block engines. Power output, around 360 horsepower, varied by specific engine version. Torque, over 450 pound-feet of torque, providing massive low-end grunt. Performance, could rocket this personal luxury coupe down the quarter-mile in the low 14-second range. Engine features, 4-barrel carburetor, solid lifters, and optional high-performance packages. This engine gave the XL sports roof muscle car levels of acceleration and torque, uncommon for a personal luxury coupe. The XL sports roof 429 was big and heavy, tipping the scales near 4,000 pounds. But the massive 429 V8 made it feel alive. Acceleration, strong and effortless, thanks to abundant torque. Handling, not a corner carver, more comfortable cruising than aggressive driving. Ride quality, tuned for a balance of comfort and control, leaning more toward luxury cruiser feel. It was essentially a muscle car in a tuxedo, ready to cruise the boulevard with authority. The XL Sports Roof 429's design stood out in subtle ways. Roofline. The sports roof name reflected the sleek, fastback-inspired hardtop roof, giving it a sporty silhouette. Front end, bold grille with quad headlights and ample chrome trim. Rear styling, sculpted taillights and a broad stance conveyed presence. Optional graphics. Racing stripes and special badging enhanced its sporty image. Yet, it was never as aggressively styled as true muscle coupes like the Mustang or Camaro, blending muscle with sophistication. Ford marketed the XL Sports Roof 429 to buyers who wanted muscle without sacrificing luxury, competed against other personal luxury cars with muscle options, such as the Chevrolet Monte Carlo SS 454 or Buick GS 455, positioned as a muscle luxury crossover, appealing to mature buyers who wanted power and prestige. Sales were modest. It was overshadowed by the Mustang and traditional muscle coupes. Many muscle car enthusiasts overlooked it, and luxury buyers found it too aggressive, making it a niche product that never fully found its audience. Several factors contributed to its relative obscurity. Changing regulations, emissions and safety rules began squeezing muscle cars out of the market. Fuel crisis. Rising gas prices dampened enthusiasm for big engines in large cars. Marketing focus. Ford shifted attention to other models like the Mustang and Torino Cobra. Niche appeal. Its blend of muscle and luxury was too specialized for broad success. As muscle cars declined in the early 70s, so did hybrids like the XL Sports Roof 429. Today, the 1970 Ford XL Sports Roof 429 is a rare and interesting piece of muscle car history, appreciated by collectors who seek unique muscle luxury blends. Recognized for its combination of big block power and upscale appointments. A snapshot of the muscle car era's final phase when muscle sought to evolve into luxury. It remains a bold example of Ford's willingness to experiment with performance and style.